and welcome to This Week in the Triangle, where I talk about local news here in North Carolina as an independent journalist. And our first story here is actually from the week before last over in Cary. So you've got the First Amendment and you've got the Second Amendment. But can you exercise those amendments at the same time? Not in North Carolina. Two men were arrested on the 14th in Cary for carrying handguns at a demonstration. So, what really happened? And is this law even constitutional? So, I looked into this a little, and from what I can tell from the arrest records, from the criminal charges, and from some social media, here's the information as best I can tell. So, two men were arrested in Cary: Daniel Jeff Milewski of Cary and Robert Stephen Myers of Clayton. So they're arrested at the No Kings rally, which was an anti-Trump rally. It was held nationwide, and one of the locations it was held at was in Cary, North Carolina, which, Cary is now one of North Carolina's largest towns, but it's more just an overgrown suburb of Raleigh. For anyone that's not familiar, it's locally known as the containment area for relocated Yankees because it has grown very fast through mass migration. So this was one of the locations for the protests. They drew a pretty decent crowd out there, and there are these two arrests that were made. So I first came across this, a post on social media, a post on Reddit, with a picture of these two gentlemen being arrested, saying, what happened. So I looked up the charges, and they were charged under North Carolina General Statute 14-277.2, which forbids people from participating in, affiliated with, or present as a spectator at any demonstration on public property from possessing any dangerous weapon. And that specifically includes firearms, including handguns, which they are both alleged to have carried. So basically, the charging document says that Myers was carrying an HK-P30 and Milewski was carrying a Glock 30 and two silver daggers. Apparently a bit of flair there. And so they're arrested at near the intersection of Maynard Road and Kildare Farm Road in Cary. This is where the demonstration was held. And this happened to be about 100 yards from Apocalypse Girl Tattoo, which is a shop that Myers owns. So this is a local business proprietor. He's arrested near his business. He has a firearm. Apparently these two gentlemen were together. And I actually got a comment on Facebook when I posted about this from someone who said they had personal knowledge, who said that these two people were carrying a sign between their two locations because the tattoo shop has, a location on each side of the road. This Facebook user said they're carrying the sign between the location. They walked down to the crosswalk to cross there, and that's where they had been arrested. And they had also been handing out business cards to the people who are gathered there. Now, the court documents, I believe it was the arrest warrants, alleged that they are participating in the protests to fulfill the conditions of that statute in the North Carolina law. But what does it mean to participate in a protest? If what this user says is true, that they are merely passing out business cards and carrying a sign across the street, is that participating in the protest? Now, for me, reading the statute, I would say no. If you're a nearby business owner, you hand out cards to protesters who are gathered in front of your store. That doesn't seem like participating to me. If you're carrying a sign across the street, once again, doesn't seem like participating. But we apparently don't have any appellate case law, more specifically defining these terms, because apparently, I don't believe this statute is prosecuted very often. I am aware of several prosecutions in the past, including a woman who was charged with carrying a firearm at one of the protests over, I think it was over the Confederate flag in Pittsburgh, a county or two over. That case was appealed, but it was not dismissed on constitutional grounds or on, the specific definitions of the statute, but on sort of a procedural error. I'm aware of another gentleman in I believe it was Raleigh. He was arrested for carrying a firearm at a protest outside an abortion clinic, but once again, I don't believe that was appealed. And so we don't necessarily have clarification as to what specifically it means to participate in a demonstration. Is handing out business cards participation? Is walking by participation? You would think that doesn't sound like participation. And the other aspect is this law constitutional? It does not appear that there has been a constitutional challenge to apply the level of scrutiny that would have been required by recent constitutional decisions. DC versus Heller was not too long ago, and this statute I don't believe has ever been analyzed by a court as to its constitutionality, because it's basically saying you can't exercise your Second Amendment right and your First Amendment right at the same time. Now, generally, you can mix and match your constitutional rights however you like, but not in this case. And that is some constitutional scrutiny that this statute might not hold up to. So I reached out to the Cary police, but did not hear back. And we have these mugshots here. So on the left, you have Robert Stephen Myers, the owner of the tattoo shop. And on the right, we have, what is his name? Daniel Jeff Maluski. It looks like I have a little typo here in this article. And once again, this material that I'm going through, you can find it at triangletrumpet.news. It is a weekly newsletter that I send out, and I also send out original articles as well on Substack. So that is triangletrumpet.news. And our next story here, also from pretty much the exact same area of Wake County. So we have a Wake County Democrat, a representative in the House, who has apologized after sharing an image from these same protests showing a decapitated Trump and a guillotine with a message: in these difficult times, some cuts may be necessary. So the context of this is that Representative Julie Von Hafen, a Democrat from Southern Wake County, shared a reel on Meta with some, the video was pictures from the protest. So she shared it with a positive caption: "No Kings protests in Raleigh. Amazing turnout all across the Triangle today, including this event at the Capitol, hosted by Wake Dems and NC Democrats." And one of the pictures, I guess, in a sort of collage from the rally, included this image of a protester carrying two severed heads. One is Trump, the other is I'm not sure exactly who it's supposed to be, but someone with a swastika on his forehead and a banner in the middle with a guillotine, basically saying, hey, we should cut people's heads off. That is the implication. That is how many people took it. And this was very unfortunate timing for her, especially because this was the same day that the shooting of two Minnesota legislators occurred and their spouses. One of those spouses actually a Raleigh native, though that's completely unrelated probably, but a little tidbit. So Von Hafen's post was exposed by Libs of TikTok, saying, hey, this is what an elected Democrat is sharing. So after that went viral with the reach from Libs of TikTok, Von Hafen, first she took down her X account, and then she made a Facebook post saying, yesterday I posted a video on social media containing crowd photos from the No Kings protests in Raleigh. One of the images of a protester holding a sign was inappropriate, and I later edited the video to remove the photo. Let me be clear, I condemn political violence in all forms. My focus remains on blah, 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 blah. So she acknowledges that the photo is inappropriate. She doesn't say who picked out the photos. Did she pick out the photos? Because presumably whoever took the photo almost certainly realized the implications of what the protester is trying to communicate. Whoever selected the photo, were they just randomly picking photos from her gallery to make into this video? I kind of doubt it. But she says it was inappropriate. She decries political violence, and she also went on the House floor to say exactly the same thing. This is, the North Carolina House of the General Assembly, basically saying she wanted to take accountability for the inappropriate image, and she apologized for anyone she offended. So if you're offended by that post, just know she is apologizing to you directly. And so we have a couple other protests happens. This week's newsletter is a little protest heavy. I didn't have too many other stories that piqued my interest to write about. But there's a rally outside of Governor Stein's executive mansion calling on him to veto some immigration enforcement bills that were on his desk. And I don't think Stein really needed any rally for him to veto these, because these are contrary to, one of the main messages of the Democratic Party, even what they've been protesting about, the No Kings and whatnot, which is they don't like that Trump is deporting illegal aliens. Now we have tons of them in our country, millions and millions and millions. We don't even necessarily know how many millions. And the Democratic Party platform is apparently to obstruct any meaningful enforcement of our immigration laws. And that was what Stein showed when he vetoed two bills which would have required increased cooperation with immigration enforcement. So, Senate Bill 153 would have required 4 state agencies to participate in the 287G program. So, it's basically, a law that allows state and local law enforcement departments to cooperate with, I believe, DHS in enforcing immigration laws. And one of the other bills he vetoed on immigration enforcement was House Bill 318, which would basically close a loophole in the current ICE detainer cooperation requirement. So the North Carolina legislature already passed a law requiring that local detention agencies like jails run by sheriff's departments, they have to cooperate with ICE detainers. So if ICE requests that they detain an illegal alien who is in their custody, they have to hold them for an additional, I believe it is 48 hours after they would otherwise release them, so that ICE can come pick them up. Now, an issue they had in Mecklenburg County is that the sheriff was technically complying with that 48-hour detention requirement, but they weren't notifying ICE when the detention began. So ICE wouldn't know when to come pick them up. And that was an issue that ICE complained about. So the Republicans in the legislature passed this additional law saying you don't just have to hold them, you also have to notify ICE when that detainer is beginning. They'll know, okay, we have 48 hours to pick up this illegal alien who made it to jail for whatever reason. So Stein vetoed those bills, basically saying blah, 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 whatever. But, we really know what's going on, which is that they don't want immigration laws enforced at all. And whether they use the excuse of due process or, oh, this is too costly or burdensome or whatever, it's pretty obvious they're fighting it on all fronts, which is no enforcement of immigration laws. So our final story for the night is banned books read on the legislative lawn. So when the Democrats talk about banned books, especially in this context, they're just talking about the access to books in school libraries and publicly funded education, because all of the books that they call banned books, you can get them on Amazon. In fact, if you go to a local bookstore, there's a good chance there's going to be a display of banned books. Okay, the real banned books are books that you can't find a copy of anywhere in bookstores, online, or whatever. And there are very few books actually like that. And there's certainly not the type of these children's books with explicit descriptions of sexual material, which is what a lot of the challenge books have been. So, some advocates for these banned books gathered on the lawn outside of the legislature and apparently read from some. Apparently, they avoided the more controversial ones to just read from some that were, promoting the LGBTQ agenda or some of the neo-Marxist racial stuff. But many of these books just have extremely graphic descriptions of sexual activity. Sometimes even like some of them are like comics, like, or whatever they call the novels with the drawings, where it's nudity, it's pornography. And so, you know, one thing I've noticed is often when the news has reported on this, they don't mention what is in the actual books, because some of these, they're not even allowed to read from the material at school board meetings because it is so profane and perverse. But that's what they're fighting for, to be in schools and to be accessible by children. So that's just a pet peeve of mine. So Once again, you can find this newsletter they send out at triangletrumpet.news. You can get local news in the greater Triangle area of North Carolina in your inbox each week, or you can, tune in when I do these. I'm hoping to move them to a more reasonable time, but mostly now I just do them to to get a little experience under my belt streaming, and also to record some short form video that I post on social media. But if you're tuned in even at this late hour, thanks for coming.